Hello everyone, my name is Meghan LeVota and I offer wisdom, tools, and support for personality integration. And today I'm going to be discussing the personality dichotomies. So for those of you who don't know, a lot of what I discuss on this channel is about Carl Jung's theory of cognitive functions, which he first talked about in his book, Psychological Types. But what most of you are definitely, or more likely to be familiar with, is the MBTI, or the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, that was inspired by Carl Jung's cognitive functions. And you might also be familiar with the 16 personalities test that's popular online. I did a video where I took that test that you can see on my channel. But I want to talk about the dichotomies and what that even means, because the main difference between the way that I tend to see type and how Carl Jung initially described the cognitive functions is this piece of the dichotomy that in Myers-Briggs, in the 16personalities.com, and lots of other online tests that are inspired by the MBTI, you're going to get the dichotomies, which are extroversion or introversion, feeling or thinking, sensing or intuition, or judging or perceiving. So it's not that Carl Jung didn't see these dichotomies, but the reality is there are 4 different ways to be extroverted. There are 4 different ways to be introverted. There are 2 different ways to feel. There are 2 different ways to think, and so on. Like, these things, they're a little bit more nuanced than it might seem. And so the MBTI was like, okay, I'm going to make this easy. I'm going to take this complex theory that Carl Jung had, and then I'm going to make this test where we test if are you an extrovert or are you an introvert? Are you a feeler or are you a thinker? And for the most part, a lot of people can take a dichotomy test and get at least somewhat close to their real type. But you might, these things don't operate as a spectrum, because like on the big 5, there's like conscientiousness or not so conscientious. I forget what they call that one. There's like openness and not so open. There's, emotional stability and instability, like neuroticism. These things do exist, for the big 5 at least, they do exist on a spectrum. And in the big 5, extroversion and introversion is a spectrum. But when we're talking about Jungian personality, it's not so much a spectrum. You either are focused on the objective external world first, or you're focused on your subjective internal world first. But something that's really important to keep in mind about these is that, for example, feeling and thinking, that's not a spectrum. You aren't in the middle of feeling and thinking. You either feel first and then think, or you think first and then feel. But what's so important to understand when diving into this is that we all feel, we all think, we all sense, and we all intuit. But when we're looking at your entire personality type, it's telling you, how do I feel? How do I think? How do I sense? How do I intuit? And do I feel in an extroverted manner? Do I feel in an introverted manner? And do I think in an extroverted manner? And do I prefer to judge before I perceive, or do I prefer to perceive before I judge? Am I perceiving the external world? Am I perceiving the internal world? And so all of these questions, all of that is boiled down to your type. And if you were to figure out your specific type, you would know the answers to all of that. And you would know what you do first, what you do second, which of your cognition tends to be more conscious, which of it tends to be more subconscious. So that's just an overview. I feel like a lot of you who are subscribed to me already know that, but I want to discuss a little further, particularly about feeling and thinking. I'll use that one as an example, because to be clear, feeling, thinking, sensing, and intuition are the 4 functions. We talk a lot about how there's 8 cognitive functions, and feeling, thinking, sensing, and intuiting, these are the 4 functions where each of those 4 functions can be expressed in 2 ways, and so 4 times 2 is 8. And the 2 ways would be the 2 orientations, which is introversion or extroversion. So introversion and extroversion are the orientations that when you apply the different orientations to the 4 functions, then you get 8 cognitive functions. So, but really, extroverted and introverted, and then judging and perceiving, those aren't functions. So if you were to take a MBTI test or a 16 personalities test, and it's testing for extroversion, extroverted or introverted, or judging or perceiving, those are not going to have anything to do with your function. These are testing your orientations or your preferences to try and guess at your functions. But so anyway, let's just talk about feeling and thinking for a second, because I think it's really important. And the reason why I was inspired to do this video was an INTP friend of mine who is getting into personality now, is a little new to it, was saying that it's ridiculous to think that an INTP couldn't be really emotional, because she found herself to be very emotional. And I think that this is a very common misunderstanding that people have when they're first getting into type, and especially when looking at a type like INTP. INTPs have introverted thinking as their top function. So yes, they are a thinker, and it's going to be very clear when you meet them that they are a thinker, because the most autopilot thing they do is seek truth and think very precisely. Like, if something is incorrect, or even if there's like one hair off, introverted thinking dominants are going to care about that, because in a way they can be sort of nitpicky, sort of critical. And if you don't value TI that much, you might find it kind of annoying or just like overly nitpicky. But for them, it's like they just want accuracy. They just want truth. And so any INTP, no matter what, is going to really value that desire for truth. But does that mean they're not emotional? No, not necessarily. And what I want to talk about here is that feeling and thinking, they are functions, and we all feel and we all think, as I mentioned before. Your emotions, however, have kind of nothing to do with your cognition. If you are a feeler, you might be paying more attention. Your mind might be paying more attention to the information that your emotions give you. And if you're a feeler, you might be more likely to use those emotions to make decisions. But we all have emotions, and we all have like thoughts. It's not like feelers don't think, right? But if you're a thinker, you're going to be using your logical reasoning, not like 9 times out of 10, like you're going to be pretty much your ego of a person. Your mind is controlled by the need to think logically. Where if you're a feeler, you are really trying to, you're focused on your values and, ethics. You're thinking about ethics and values. So, when you get your personality stack, and if you don't already know your type, I do offer personality typing services that you can look into below. But let's just say that you think you know your type and you're looking at your cognitive stack. Like, your first 2 functions, your dominant and your auxiliary, are going to be the ones that really you're super conscious of. And so if you're like an NF, for example, that means that your first 2 functions are intuition and feeling. So that means that your thinking and your sensing are in your subconscious. They're in your shadow, at least to some extent. Like, there are various definitions of the shadow, but at least to know that you are less conscious of that. But that does not mean that you are not thinking. It does not mean that you are not impacting the sensory world around you. And if you know an intuitive and you know how aloof that they can maybe be, just because they don't see that there's a chair right in front of them doesn't mean that they are immune to bumping into it. Just because you aren't looking at the sensory world or you aren't conscious of it doesn't mean that you don't make an impact. So that's one thing. Just because you are trying to make your decisions logically doesn't mean that it's not going to be hard emotionally sometimes. And I think it's important, and what I told the INTP who I was talking to is like, if anything, you feel even more out of control of your emotions. And I've said this before, INTPs can be very emotionally turbulent because your extroverted feeling is in your subconscious, and you do, on a subconscious level, sort of care what people think about you. And INTPs are more aware of the external emotional environment around them in a subconscious way, and that impacts them. And you know, for those of you who know on my channel, like, I'm an ENFJ, I'm a feeler. I have a lot of thoughts about personality type, and doesn't mean that I'm being super illogical in everything that I'm saying. It's just that for me, my desire to study this stuff is because I feel like it. I want to. I want to know about other people. I want to help people. And that desire, that emotional desire, is what drives me to be accurate and to do a good job. So my feeling comes first, and then it's supported by thought. And if you're interested in, Carl Jung talks about, sorry, I can't talk, the individuation process, where it talks about pulling your shadow into your consciousness. And it's this sort of self-actualization process where you pull your shadow up into your consciousness by shining a light on it. And the thing is that it doesn't matter if you're a feeler or a thinker. Like, you aren't in the middle. You do one consciously more than the other, but we're all humans, and we all have emotions, and we all have thoughts, and whatever one you're most conscious of, really, you could just use that as information to know what you naturally do, so that you know what to really try and pull into your consciousness more. You know, I've said this before, but like, thinkers aren't like more smart than feelers, and feelers aren't like more nice than thinkers. It's just, where's your conscious attention going? And if you know where your conscious attention's going, then it can be really helpful to know what areas you are ignoring. So there is no such thing as being in the middle of feeling and thinking, no such thing as being in the middle of sensing and intuiting. If you were to think of your mind as a machine, what is in charge? And what is supporting, like, what's like the president, what's like the VP, you know, those things. Like, I can use a million metaphors, but like, think about yourself cognitive, like you are an engine. Your mind is an engine, and how does it work? How does it work? How does your mind try and make sense of who you are and the emotions and thoughts you have? So you could be, I would say that if you are a feeler who has done a lot of work integrating your thinking, and you really care about being intellectual, and you really want to challenge your preconceived notions and your biases, and you want to be truthful, you might test on a dichotomy test that you are 55% feeler or something. It doesn't mean that you it doesn't mean that you're in the middle, and it doesn't mean that you do both equally, you know, because we can retrain our brains to think differently. We may have a cognitive personality type that we were born with. That's the general consensus, at least. But that doesn't mean that you can't change the way you think about yourself and use your natural skills to the best of your ability. So thank you so much for watching this video. If you have any questions, let me know. If you have any ideas for video topics you'd like me to do, let me know. I know I haven't done a video in a while, but I wanted to wait till I felt super inspired to. I have a personality type Facebook group you can join. You can follow me on Twitter and talk to me there. A bunch of stuff below. I offer mentoring. And one last thing I'll say, if you happen to be watching this today, which I don't even know what date it is, it's Wednesday, I am going to be going live on Facebook with Susan Storm of Psychology Junkie. So I'll have that link below as well if you did happen to catch this today. At 7:30 Central Time, I'm going to be interviewed by her on her Facebook page. So if you are interested in catching that, I'll have that information too. And if you watch this later, you might want to go check out Susan's blog as well. So thank you so much for watching and have a wonderful rest of your day.